When I first saw the letter, it was tucked inside an old recipe book. The edges were yellowed, the paper soft like it had been folded and unfolded many times. My heart froze for a moment. I didn't know why, but I felt it was meant for me. Even though my name wasn't written anywhere on it, it had been 10 years since my mother passed away. 10 long years since I last heard her voice, or saw her hands moving gracefully while she cooked. I thought I had made peace with her absence. But that letter, it brought everything back. You see, my mother and I didn't part on good terms. The last time we spoke, I was angry. She was quiet, but I didn't listen. I told her she never understood me, and then, I left home. I didn't call, I didn't write, and when I finally heard she had fallen sick, it was too late. She was gone before I could say sorry. For years, I carried that guilt quietly, like a stone in my chest. I told myself she must have been disappointed in me until her last breath. That thought haunted me through every birthday, every family dinner, every time I saw a mother and daughter laughing together. That evening, when I found the letter, I was at my sister's house, helping her clean out old boxes from the attic. We were both tired, covered in dust, laughing at old photos. But when that small envelope slipped out of the recipe book, everything went silent. I asked her, "Do you know what this is?" She frowned, shook her head. "No, maybe something Mom kept." I turned the envelope over. It was sealed, but the paper had grown weak. My hands trembled as I peeled it open. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, my mother's handwriting, neat and gentle, just like I remembered. I didn't read it right away. I just stared at her words for a moment, tracing the familiar loops and curves of her letters. I could almost hear her voice again, soft, patient, and loving. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. I placed the letter on the table in front of me and whispered, "Mom, what did you want to tell me?" And with shaking hands, I began to read. Soft piano fades in, sound of paper unfolding. I didn't know it then, but those few lines were about to change everything I thought I knew about her and about myself. I still remember the day I left home. It was summer, the kind of day when the air feels heavy, and everything you say seems to echo longer than it should. I was 22, angry, proud, and convinced that my mother was the reason for everything wrong in my life. She had always been careful with her words, but that day, I think she was tired too. We had argued again, about something small, maybe the kind of job I wanted, or the friends I was keeping. I can't even remember what started it. I just remember how it ended. She said softly, "You think I'm your enemy, but I'm only trying to protect you." And I snapped back, "Then stop protecting me. Let me live my own life." There was silence after that. Long, heavy silence. She stood by the window, her hands folded. The sunlight fell across her face, and I noticed for the first time how much older she looked, but I didn't stop. I picked up my bag and walked past her. As I reached the door, she said one last thing, not loud, not angry, just a whisper, "Take care of yourself, my child." I didn't turn around. I wish I had. For years, that moment replayed in my mind, her standing there, quiet, holding back tears she didn't want me to see. But at that time, all I could think about was freedom. I moved to another city, started a job, rented a small room, and told myself I was finally living the life I wanted. But every small success felt a little hollow. When something good happened, I'd reach for my phone, and then stop, remembering that there was no one to call. When I fell sick, I wished for her soup, her voice, her touch. But pride is a strange thing. It keeps you from going back, even when your heart begs you to. My sister used to call and say, "Mom asks about you every day." And I'd say, "I'll visit soon." But soon became months, then years. Then one evening, my sister's voice on the phone changed. She said, "Mom's not well." I froze. My heart dropped. I promised I'd come the next morning. But that night, while I was packing my bag, the call came again. This time, there were no words, only silence on the other end. And I knew. I reached home the next day, but all I could do was stand beside her bed, hold her cold hand, and whisper the apology I should have said years ago. That was the day I realized. Love doesn't always end in shouting or goodbye. Sometimes it ends in silence, and the words left unsaid echo louder than anything else. Soft rain sound fades in, visual dim room, folded hands, letter lying on the table. I thought she had left me with that silence forever, but years later, her letter would show me she never truly stopped speaking to me. I just hadn't been ready to listen. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in my hands. The house was quiet. My sister was asleep upstairs, but I couldn't. Something inside me wouldn't let me rest until I read it. The paper was thin and fragile, like it might fall apart if I breathed too hard. My mother's handwriting was still, as I remembered, gentle loops, soft and careful, as though she had written every word with love. I took a deep breath and began to read. "My dear child," it began. The moment I saw those 3 words, my throat tightened. I hadn't heard her call me that in so long. I blinked back tears and kept reading. "I don't know if you will ever read this. I just want you to know that I never stopped thinking of you. Every night, I sit by the window and pray that you are safe, that you have eaten well, that you are warm. Mothers worry, even when their children are far away." I paused there. The words blurred before my eyes. My hands were shaking. It felt like she was sitting right across from me, speaking softly like she used to when I was a child and had done something wrong. She continued, "If I ever made you feel trapped, it wasn't because I didn't trust you. It was because I didn't trust the world. You are my heart walking outside my body, and when you left, it felt like a piece of me went with you. But I understand now, you needed to find your own sky." I couldn't go on. My voice broke as I whispered, "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" The tears I had held in 4 years finally came. I pressed the letter against my chest and sobbed quietly. All those years of anger, guilt, and misunderstanding melted into one long ache. When I finally gathered enough strength to continue, I read the last few lines. "Please don't carry the weight of our last words. I know you loved me, even when you were angry, and I hope, wherever life takes you, you remember, you were never a disappointment to me. You were my greatest joy." I had to stop again. I couldn't breathe. The pain and comfort in her words came together in a way I'd never felt before. For years, I thought she had died believing I didn't care. But now, in her handwriting, was proof that she never stopped loving me. I folded the letter carefully and held it close. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me like a door opening after years of being locked. Sound cue, faint piano, and wind outside a window. I whispered into the quiet kitchen, "I'm sorry, Mom. And thank you." That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, the letter beside me, feeling like she was finally home again, not in the house, but in my heart. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, touching the letter still lying on the table. I hadn't moved it all night. It felt sacred somehow, like it carried the last piece of my mother's soul. When my sister walked in and saw me sitting there, she didn't say anything at first. She poured herself some tea, looked at me, then at the letter. "You read it," she said quietly. I nodded, my throat still sore from crying. "When did she write it?" I asked. "And why didn't you ever tell me it existed?" My sister sighed and sat across from me. Her eyes softened. But there was something heavy behind them, a truth she had been carrying for too long. She wrote it a few days before she went to the hospital. She said, "I found it in her drawer after she passed. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but I knew it was meant for you." I frowned, confused. "Then why didn't you give it to me back then?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Because you were so broken, and so was I. I didn't want to reopen your wounds. You were already drowning in guilt. I thought, maybe it would hurt less if you never saw it." Her voice trembled, and I felt my anger dissolve before it could even form. I realized she hadn't hidden it out of cruelty. She had done it out of love, out of fear of breaking me even more. I looked down at the letter again. "All these years," I whispered, "I thought she was disappointed in me." "She never was," my sister said softly. "You were her favorite topic. She'd always say, 'She's stubborn, just like me.' She used to pray for you every single night." The words hit me like a wave. My mother, the woman I thought I had failed, had loved me without pause, even through silence. I remembered the last time I had stood in this kitchen, angry and self-righteous, walking out while she stood by the window. That moment had haunted me for years, but now I saw it differently. She hadn't been angry or hurt. She had been waiting for me to come back when I was ready. My sister reached across the table and took my hand. "She knew you'd find the letter one day," she said. "She told me, when she's ready to forgive herself, she'll find it." Those words broke me all over again. But this time, it wasn't from pain. It was from love, from realizing how deeply a mother's heart can understand her child, even when separated by years and pride. Sound cue, gentle music, birds outside, morning light through window. I looked at my sister and smiled weakly. Maybe she knew this was how I'd come home again. She nodded. She always knew. And for the first time in years, The silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt full of the love our mother had left behind in her words. Later that afternoon, I found myself standing outside my mother's old bedroom. The door was slightly open, the way she used to leave it, never completely shut, as if to say, "You're always welcome here." I hesitated before stepping in. It had been more than 10 years since I'd last crossed that doorway. My footsteps felt heavy, like I was walking into a memory instead of a room. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The floral curtains she loved were faded now, and her old wooden dressing table was covered with a thin layer of dust. But her scent still lingered, that faint mix of jasmine soap and rose oil. It stopped me in my tracks. I closed my eyes and, for a moment, I could almost hear her humming softly to herself, that gentle tune she always sang while brushing her hair. I ran my fingers across the dressing table, tracing the outlines of her old hairbrush, her perfume bottle, the tiny silver locket she used to wear, the same one I'd seen her holding when she was deep in thought. I picked it up carefully and opened it. Inside was a small picture of me as a child, smiling, missing a front tooth, holding a bunch of flowers. That's when it hit me. She had kept me close all along, even when I wasn't there, even when I thought she'd stopped caring. I sat on her bed and let the memories wash over me. The nights she stayed awake when I was sick, the times she listened patiently to my endless stories, the quiet way she'd say, "I love you." Before turning off the lights, I whispered into the empty room, "I wish I'd said it back more often, Mom." The walls didn't answer, but somehow, the silence felt comforting, like she was listening. My sister came to the doorway and leaned against the frame. "You haven't been in here since, well, since before she left," she said softly. I nodded. "It feels like she's still here." "She is," she replied, "in everything she touched, in everything we are." I looked around again. The books she'd read, the shawl she'd knitted, the unfinished embroidery still lying beside her chair. She had lived quietly, but she had loved deeply. I just hadn't seen it then. I placed the letter on her pillow, smoothing it out gently. "She deserves to rest with her words," I said. My sister smiled. "She'd be happy to know you came back." I smiled too, though my eyes filled again. I think she knew I would. Sound cue, faint music, light wind through curtains, distant birds. As I turned off the light and closed the door behind me, I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't always come with words or apologies. Sometimes it comes quietly, in a room filled with memories, where love still lives even after the person is gone. That day, I didn't just visit her room, I came home to her, and to myself. A few days later, I decided to help my sister sort through the boxes stored in the corner of my mother's room. Most of them were filled with old clothes, neatly folded and smelling faintly of lavender. But one box caught my attention. It was smaller than the rest, tied with a faded blue ribbon. On top, in my mother's handwriting, were 3 words, "For my daughters." My sister and I exchanged a glance. She smiled sadly. "I never opened that one," she said. "I couldn't bring myself to." I untied the ribbon carefully. Inside were little pieces of her life, things that must have meant something to her, though we'd never known. There was a bundle of letters tied with string, a small diary, a photo of the 3 of us, me, my sister, and Mom, standing in front of our old house. And then there was a hand-knitted scarf, still soft, still warm. When I lifted the scarf, a small folded paper slipped out. My heart stopped for a second. It wasn't another letter exactly, just a note, written in her same familiar handwriting. It said, "These are the things I couldn't say out loud. Keep them close when the world feels cold." I felt my throat tightened again. My sister sat beside me, quietly holding my hand as we looked through the box together. There was her diary too, nothing dramatic, just her everyday thoughts, pages filled with grocery lists, recipes, and little reflections about life, but scattered among them were lines that made my heart ache. "She called today even for a minute. It made me happy. I hope she's eating well. Maybe she'll visit this winter. Some days I miss her laugh so much it hurts." I could barely read further. My mother had carried her love quietly, tucked between the lines of her simple life. She didn't complain. She didn't write of resentment, only love and hope. I realized then how much I had misunderstood her. To me, she had always seemed strict, overprotective, maybe even controlling. But now, reading her words, I saw something different. A woman doing her best to hold her family together, even when her own heart was breaking. My sister whispered, "She must have written these after you left." I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. She never stopped believing I'd come back. I picked up the scarf and held it close. It smelled faintly of her perfume, rose, and sandalwood. For a moment, I could almost feel her arms around me again. Sound cue, soft music, quiet wind, faint turning of paper pages. I looked at the note again. Keep them close when the world feels cold. That night, I wrapped the scarf around my shoulders before I went to sleep. It was as if she was tucking me in, one last time, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of regret. I dreamt of her smile. A few mornings later, I woke up before dawn. The house was still and quiet, the air cool and heavy with the scent of rain. I couldn't explain it, but something inside me whispered, "It's time." I put on my coat, wrapped my mother's scarf around my neck, and told my sister I was going out for a while. She didn't ask where, she just nodded softly, as if she already knew. The road to the cemetery was the same one I had taken years ago, but this time it felt different. Back then, I had walked it filled with guilt and sorrow. Now, I carried something gentler, a sense of peace I hadn't known before. When I reached her resting place, the sun was just beginning to rise. The sky was pale gold, and a thin mist hung over the grass. I stood there for a long moment, unable to move, just watching the light fall across her name carved in stone. "Hi, Mom," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's been a while." The words felt strange, too small for everything I wanted to say. I knelt down and brushed a few leaves away from the headstone. The stone was cold beneath my fingers, but the moment I touched it, I felt something warm inside, like she was still listening. I took the letter out of my bag, the one I had found in her recipe book, and placed it gently beside the flowers. "I read it," I said quietly, "every word, and I finally understand." For a long while, I just talked to her about the years I'd been gone, the mistakes I'd made, the moments I wished she could have seen. My voice cracked when I said, "I'm sorry for the things I said that day. I thought you were trying to hold me back, but now I know you were just trying to hold me close." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees, almost like a reply. I smiled through my tears. "You were right about everything, you know, about patience, about love, about forgiveness. I just took too long to learn it." I sat there until the sun climbed higher, the world slowly waking around me. The warmth touched my face, and for the first time in years, I felt truly light, as if I had finally put down a burden I'd been carrying for far too long. Sound cue, gentle wind, distant church bells, soft piano, fade in. Before leaving, I laid her scarf over the flowers. "You don't have to worry about me anymore," I said softly. "I'm home now." As I turned to go, I felt the breeze brush against my cheek, gentle, almost like a mother's touch, and in that quiet morning light, I knew she had forgiven me long before I ever asked for it. It's been months since I found my mother's letter, but some nights, I still take it out and read it again. The paper is more fragile now, a little torn at the folds, but her words feel alive. Every time I read them, I find something new, something I missed before. At first, I thought that letter was a message of forgiveness, but now, I understand it was something deeper, a lesson in love. Quiet, patient love that doesn't vanish, even when life pulls people apart. The kind that doesn't demand to be seen or thanked. The kind that waits. I used to think love was about grand gestures, being there, saying the right things, never making mistakes. But my mother's love wasn't like that. Hers was gentle and steady, the kind you only notice when it's gone. She didn't need to prove it. She lived it every day in the meals she cooked, the late nights she stayed awake, the prayers she whispered when no one else was listening. Her letter made me realize that love doesn't disappear when words fail or when distance grows. It stays, quietly, in the spaces between memories. It lives on through the lessons it leaves behind. Now, I try to live the way she did, softer, slower, more forgiving. I've started calling my sister more often, just to ask how she's doing. I reach out to old friends I lost touch with. I try to say, "I love you" before it's too late, because I know now how heavy regret can feel, and how rare it is to get a second chance. Sometimes, when I cook one of her old recipes, I catch myself humming the same tune she used to hum. It makes me smile. I used to avoid anything that reminded me of her, but now, I welcome those moments. They make me feel close to her again. I think about what she wrote. "You were my greatest joy." Those words used to make me cry, but now they make me grateful. Grateful that even though I failed her in moments, she never failed me in love. Sound cue, soft piano, warm light tone. If I could speak to her one more time, I'd tell her this: "You didn't have to worry, Mom. You did enough, more than enough." And maybe that's what her letter really meant. not just forgiveness for the past, but permission to move forward, to live without guilt, to love without fear. So now, when the world feels cold, I hold her scarf close, and I whisper the same words she once wrote. These are the things I couldn't say out loud, only now, I can say them, because her love didn't end with her goodbye, it began again with her letter. Fade out, soft music, image of sunlight through window, letter resting on table,